Right now, somewhere under the Pacific Ocean, 4 kilometers down, in water cold enough to kill you in minutes and dark enough that no light has ever reached it, a message is passing beneath the fish. Maybe it's this video. Maybe it's your bank moving your money. Maybe it's a phone call between Sydney and Los Angeles. It's traveling through a glass thread thinner than a human hair, wrapped in a tube about the width of a garden hose, lying on the bottom of the sea. Most people think the internet lives in space. It doesn't. It lives on the seabed. And today, we're going down to look at it. This is The Quiet Machines. Episode 1. The Cables Under the Sea. Ask most people how a video call gets from Australia to America, and they'll point up. Satellites. Right. It feels obvious. Space is where the future lives. Here's the reality. Satellites carry a tiny sliver of international traffic, by some regulatory measures, well under 1%. Almost everything else, the traffic between continents, the backbone of the entire internet, goes by sea. The intercontinental internet is, overwhelmingly, an underwater machine. When you send an email to another continent, it doesn't fly. It swims. So what is a submarine cable? Actually, strip one open and it's a set of nested layers, like a very serious onion. At the very center, optical fibers, strands of ultra-pure glass, each about the diameter of a human hair. A big modern cable might carry 16 or 24 fiber pairs. That's the payload. Everything else exists to protect them. Around the fibers, a steel tube, then strength wires, then a copper conductor. That one's important. Hold that thought. Then polyethylene insulation. In shallow water, where the danger is, they add layers of galvanized steel armor and tar-soaked nylon. Out in the deep ocean, where nothing much can touch it, the cable is surprisingly slim, about the width of a garden hose. Near the shore, armored up, it gets closer to the width of your arm. The glass in the middle stays the same. The wrapping is just a measure of how dangerous the neighborhood is. How much of this stuff is down there? As of this year, there are more than 600 submarine cable systems active or planned around the world, and laid end to end, they'd run over 1.5 million kilometers. That's enough cable to wrap around the Earth more than 37 times. Or, if you prefer, about 4 trips to the moon. Australia hangs off this web by a handful of threads, cables running to Singapore, to Guam, to New Zealand, to the west coast of the United States. Every Australian website you visit that's hosted overseas, which is most of them, arrives through one of those threads. Here's the part that surprises people. This is not a new idea. It's not even a 20th century idea. The first transatlantic cable was laid in 1858, before Australia was a federation, before the light bulb. Queen Victoria sent a congratulatory telegram to the American president through a copper wire lying on the Atlantic seabed. It took about 17 hours to transmit. The cable failed within weeks. An engineer basically cooked it by pumping too much voltage through. But the point was made. You could talk through the ocean. We've been maintaining an unbroken tradition of ocean floor telecommunications ever since. The technology changed, copper to coaxial to glass, but the idea is 170 years old. If you want two continents to speak, you run a wire along the bottom of the sea. So how do you install a 10,000-kilometer garden hose across an ocean? With one of the most specialized vehicles on Earth, a cable ship. Picture a vessel the length of a football field, with enormous circular tanks below decks, holding thousands of kilometers of coiled cable, loaded in one continuous length. The ship crawls along a surveyed route at walking pace, paying the cable out over the stern, controlling tension the whole way so the cable settles onto the seabed, instead of snapping, taut across underwater canyons. Near the coast, where anchors and trawlers prowl, they don't just drop it, they bury it. A sea plow rides the seabed behind the ship, cutting a trench, laying the cable into it, and letting the sediment close over the top. Out past about 1,500 meters of depth, the ocean itself is protection enough, and the cable simply rests on the bottom, in the dark, for the next quarter of a century. Inside the fiber, your data is light, laser pulses flicking on and off billions of times a second, in dozens of colors, at once down a single strand of glass. But even the purest glass isn't perfectly clear. After 60 or 80 kilometers, the light gets dim. So spaced along the cable, every 60-odd kilometers, sit repeaters, sealed metal cylinders that take the fading signal and re-amplify it, entirely optically. A trans-Pacific cable might have well over 100 of them, each engineered to run for 25 years, 4 kilometers down, with 0 maintenance visits. Nobody is coming down to change a battery. And this is why that copper layer matters. The repeaters need electricity, and there are no power points on the abyssal plane. The cable powers itself. Stations on shore push thousands of volts down the copper conductor, and every repeater along the way sips from that single electrical thread. The cable is not just a data line. It's the world's longest extension cord. And the numbers these things do are absurd. One modern transatlantic cable, Maria, running from Virginia to Spain, has been tested at over 200 terabits per second. That's a good chunk of a whole country's internet traffic, through one garden hose. 200 terabits is millions of people streaming video simultaneously, through a pipe you could hide inside a pool noodle. Of course, things this long, this exposed, break constantly. On average, there's a cable fault somewhere in the world, roughly every couple of days, a couple of hundred a year. The villains are not what you'd hope. It's almost never sharks. That's a myth that refuses to die. Modern cables are effectively shark-proof, and shark bites were only ever a footnote. The real killers are boring and human, fishing gear and ship anchors, dragging across the seabed where the cable comes ashore. An anchor dropped in the wrong place can saw through a country's connectivity in seconds. Earthquakes and undersea landslides take out cables too. A landslide off Taiwan in 2006 snapped a whole cluster of them at once and dragged parts of Asia's internet down for weeks. So how do you fix a broken cable that's 4 kilometers underwater? You go fishing for it. A repair ship steams to the fault, which the shore stations can locate electrically, sometimes to within a few hundred meters, and lowers a grapnel, a hook on a very long rope, and drags it across the seabed until it snags the cable. In deep water, they'll deliberately cut the cable, raise one end, buoy it off at the surface, then go back for the other end. Then, on the deck of a rolling ship, a jointer One of a small guild of specialists splices hair-thin glass fibers back together under a microscope, rebuilds the layers around them, and tests the whole thing. The repaired cable is lowered gently back to the bottom. Done well. It's invisible. The whole operation takes days to weeks, and the world's entire stock of ships that can do this numbers only in the dozens, most of them decades old. It is one of the quietest, most under-resourced professions holding up modern life. Here's the thing about this whole system. It works so well that you've never had to think about it. Your video call doesn't tell you it crossed 3 oceans. The machine is quiet, and that silence is the achievement. 170 years of engineering, distilled into the experience of nothing happening. But it's worth knowing it's down there, because every tap on your phone is a small act of faith in a garden hose at the bottom of the sea, laid by ships, powered from the shore, repaired by hand, in the dark, on your behalf. This is the quiet machines. If you like this, there's a whole world of ignored infrastructure to get through. Next time, how a container port unloads a city's worth of stuff before lunch. Subscribe if you want to know how the world actually works.